My name's Steve Killpack. I'm a farmer from Western Iowa and owner of a software platform designed to enhance growers' profitability and stewardship as we look at input applications and really try to drive improved decision making. We've got this question poised today about where will you be in 2020 and actually 2020 and beyond as we look through this growing season, and really starting to dive into what we can do with precision ag information and how that can influence your profitability. So just a little bit about me and my background. Grew up in Western Iowa. We have I would say it's a smaller farming operation, farm about 1,400 acres. We do a lot of unique things on our farm. When I set out to start farming, really looked at how do we improve and enhance our profitability on the farm. So this is a picture of one of our fields, and this is some strip cropping that we do. Just a unique way to enhance yield and take the same inputs and really drive productivity. Everybody always asks, how do the soybeans yield? Well, not as good as they normally would, but the corn is dramatically improved. So we do a lot of on-farm research, work alongside the Iowa Soybean Association to learn and really decide what's influencing our productivity. In about 2014, I'd been doing a lot of precision ag work and was really frustrated with the platforms that were available to help influence my decision making and drive our understanding on our farm. So I set out to create an online ag data platform that was really easy to use and created a lot of simplified information resources that were really meaningful and valuable to farmers. I looked at this with my farmer hat on and said, what do I actually need to make decisions to really drive understanding and then help me become more profitable? And that was the most important piece. Was I wanted to be environmentally friendly and simultaneously do everything I could to influence our profitability. So founded Acumen Agronomics, and this is the web URL, acumen.ag. It's a super easy interface where we can upload information and then get reports and prescriptive services back from that system. So simplifying information and the process is really my passion. If any of you have ever worked with precision ag data, you know that it can be very time-consuming and a tedious task. And we really wanted to change that process and change the way we look at our farms. And this has dramatically changed our farming operation and being able to look at things in a different way. When we sat down to think about what's driving our decision making as farmers, we looked at the seed industry, agronomy sales, university research, commodity organization research, crop consultants, but so many times the farmer's own information was left out of the plate. And that was something that we really wanted to change and add to the mix, was how do we make this simple enough that growers can empower their information and then using all of the information that's in the industry to be better. And we've all heard a lot about big data and how big data is going to revolutionize agriculture. So what is big data? Will it change what we're doing? How can we use it? And then what are the problems associated with big data? And I think about it like this. Our big data analysis tells us that only the top performers leave for higher pay. Since you're still here, it means your performance is average at best. And that's not fair, and that's what all the average people say. So when we think about data and understanding information in agriculture, we really have to look at it through a different lens and realize that taking a whole bunch of information and putting it together can keep us pretty average. And as we move into the future of farming and 2021 and recognizing the challenges that we face with profitability and stewardship, being average isn't going to cut it. And so we want to move beyond that. And as we keep trying to add more and more data, it really becomes confusing. And so we set out to understand small data, or the data that you are collecting on your farming operation. And that's really the information that we're after. We have all of these great partners in the industry that help us capture big data. They help define the road ditches, keep us within the boundaries, and then it really comes down to how do you apply what you are doing on your farm, learn from that, and enhance your profitability. So as we look through this, it's really about how clearly you can see the path. If I could show you this image and you'd say, well, that's a block of just random colors. That's getting a little bit clearer. And now you can see that it's the Mona Lisa. And as you think about the information that you're collecting on your farm, what information do you want to capture? Do you want to capture the very unclear image or as clear of an image as you possibly can? So that's what we have set out to do, is to really drive profitability in uncertain times, looking at 3 keys to success. Understand your profitability at a very detailed level. Understand your break-evens to market when necessary, and then efficiently manage inputs and resources for maximum return on investment. And how do we accomplish that? So currently, when we think about profitability, a lot of us have different tools that we're using for our farm budgets, which may be spreadsheets, different software platforms, pen and paper, bank financial reports. Current management strategies often include just blanket input applications, variable rate applications that often have a bias approach to it, someone's gut feeling about how it should be done. And we really wanted to try to take a lot of those things off the plate and move towards something that was really geared around your information and your decision making. So the first thing in moving into a really profitable scenario in your farming operation is to understand the profitability of your fields at a very granular level. So this is one of our fields, and the black areas are areas where we're making money, and the red areas are where we're losing money, and the gray areas are where we're breaking even. And this was always one of my goals, because as an agronomist in the industry, I wanted to understand, why are we making the agronomic recommendations that we are without fully understanding the economic ramifications with those recommendations. So this was really the starting point of what we wanted to accomplish. How do we look at profitability as the baseline decision-making tool to influence every other decision that we make on the farm? And I know from experience as a farmer, if I don't have money to put towards an input, I'm not going to buy that input. So the first thing that we wanted to do, and what we strive to do with all of our customers, is to ensure that they are profitable. So when I look at this, I have to understand there are areas of my farming operation that are not as profitable as others. And we'll see this time and time again. In this example of this field, with the input costs that we have plugged in behind this field made $161 an acre on average. But we had areas where we were making well over $250 an acre. In fact, we had 5.6 acres that were over that number on this 97-acre field. And we had approximately 11 acres in that, so 10% or better of the farm where we were losing money. And if you think about those areas where you're losing money, those are areas where your break even really goes up dramatically. And that was the next piece that we wanted to look at, is to understand field by field break evens. Because with those same input costs, and you can see on this report we've got the input costs plugged in at the bottom, based on a 222 bushel yield that we experienced, that gave us a break even of $2.81, which for most guys that sounds pretty good. But if we change the yield value, if we change the other parameters that went into this equation, that number changes. And in reality, we have to start to think about our farms as smaller and smaller fields that have different break-evens so we can make better decisions about the inputs that need to go into this. And that's what we set out to try to accomplish with our software platform, was to make a really autonomous, easy way for growers to generate recommendations. They didn't have to have the knowledge or the know-how, just as simple as loading information and getting reports back and prescriptive services. And one of the things that we are really passionate about is placing inputs where they are needed. And there are all different kinds of ideas around seeding and fertility and all of the other pieces that go into farming. One of the things that I'll focus on today is the methodology that we have for seeding rate in corn production. We also have a model in soybeans. But this is looking at the ear weight of corn. And the average ear weight on this field was 0.38 pounds. And we made a comparison to the flat rate seeding rate that was actually planted in this field of 34,000. And we determined that we could have planted this field at 31,960 on average, which would have saved us about $600 on the seed cost. And why is that meaningful? Well, if I can take $600 of input costs off, now my break-evens start to go lower. And as I look at the whole field profitability, I can really start to shave some of those things off. And it's not because we're skimping. It's because we're optimizing the placement of our inputs for maximum economic return, which also lends itself to being environmentally friendly, because you're going to innately manage those inputs for the output that you are achieving. So we look at ear weight in corn production. Now, what is the ear weight of corn, and why does that matter? Well, you can have the same 2 ears of corn. They can be 14 kernels around and 40 kernels long, but one can weigh 0.3 of a pound with the grain. The other can weigh 0.4 of a pound. And this is what we are trying to understand with optimizing the seed as one of the first steps that we take in maximizing profitability, and then really driving that to the inputs that are associated with the crop that we are planting. So when we think about how a lot of current recommendations are made, we oftentimes have a yield goal, and we have some yield objective that we're trying to achieve. We go apply nutrients based on that yield goal, and we have oftentimes variable output. So why seeding rate? And it's actually carrying capacity of the soil that we are measuring. Everything on planet Earth has a ecological carrying capacity, and corn and soybeans are no different. So we're trying to understand that so we can optimize all of the inputs. But when we think about 200 bushel corn with 0.3 of a pound of grain, that means we have to plant 37,333 plants per acre. There's a lot of talk about moving to 300 bushel corn. That's 56,000 plants per acre. And I'm always striving to move the needle even farther than that, because my opinion is, as I have more output, that means I'm more efficiently taking up the nutrients that I'm applying. As we look at 0.4 of a pound of grain, 200 bushels requires 28,000 plants per acre. 300 bushels, 42,000. 400 bushels, 56,000. And if we go to a half a pound, 200 bushels requires 22,400. 300 bushels, 33,600. 400 bushels, 44,800. And then if you get up there at 0.6 of a pound, 200 bushels, 18,666. 300 bushels, 28,000. 400 bushels is 37,333. Here's an example of some of this is for a field day, but some of the different plots that we've put in. This is looking at 39,000 plants, and went out and measured exactly where those plants were, put them back on in that 1/1000th of an acre in 30-inch rows, and tracked the yield by plants, so the individual yield, if every single plant was exactly the same, what the yield would have been. So you can see that plant number 1, we were over 400 bushel corn if we had every single plant performing at that level, and 11 and 12, and that's the ear weight. So if we could maximize the ear weight, we would have had 400 bushel corn, but we have variability. So why do we have that variability? Well, in this particular instance, in this plot that we did, we looked at the hours of emergence. And you can see that everything that came up within about a 6-hour window, we were producing really, really high yields. And as we went farther and farther down the line in terms of hours of emergence, we produced less and less yield per plant and equivalent per acre. So here's that individual plant yield. And as we look at those 39 plants and how much they deviated. And so you can see that we've got plants that are producing over 0.6 of a pound of grain all the way down to, we're at about 0.18 pounds of grain. And that is meaningful because these are things that we can influence. And as you think about how many seeds per acre do I need to purchase to achieve a yield, this is part of the equation, is how good a job am I going to do with those seeds. And so managing your resources, whether that's your equipment, the technology that your equipment is running, will impact the results that we get. And then here's the same ear weight deviation by hours of emergence. Why does that even matter? Well, it matters because when we look at the data, whether it's university data or our own in-house data sets, we realize that there's a big window in which corn will perform at near optimum yield. And if I were to take some of the Midwestern universities' data, and let's look at a replant guideline, it would say, well, I could be at 24,000 and that would be 98% of my target yield. And I struggle a little bit with that because what is my target yield? And am I achieving the yield that I'm after? So we have this chart where we look at, here's the different populations by different ear weights. And so you can see the range from 34,000. So if the average seeding rate in the state of Iowa is 33,500, 34,000, and we went and looked at where the average yield was, we can say, okay, somewhere we're between 0.35 and 0.4 of a pound of grain. Maybe we're a little bit less than that. Typically, when we process information, 0.33 pounds is the average ear weight that comes through our system. So if I think of that, does that mean that that is the ear weight that we should expect? And the answer is no, because in a lot of instances, we have ear weights that are at 0.5 pound or better, and then we have ear weights that are at 0.2 of a pound. And why does that happen? Because the carrying capacity of the soil is different, whether it's from water or nutrients. And this will give us a strong baseline to understand how to really influence and change those values. So one of the things that we brought to the table to really simplify how growers interact with seeding recommendations is this platform, which is focused solely on creating seeding recommendations for growers, and it's really just a first little bite into managing your inputs. And so we're offering free trials with SeedSite. The way that we build our pricing structure is really geared around if you have seed savings that we're estimating, it's off of 10% of that seed savings. So if you're not saving anything, you're not getting charged anything. And so real quickly, just being able to go back through some of the reports and the information that we are using on our farms and with customers to try to drive enhanced decision making. Break-even reports, profitability reports, and whenever I look at these, it always raises the question, in those areas that are red on my farm, what should I be doing differently? Because if we're here to talk about right product, right rate, right timing, we really need to think about those areas that are underperforming are not achieving that goal. And they're not achieving the goal of profitability. And this is really our mission, is to take those areas, and maybe they're not going to ever turn dark black, but can we get them to move up to where they're closer to break even? And if we can manage those areas by optimizing our seeding rate in both corn and soybeans and the fertility that goes behind those crops, then perhaps we can really start to change the outlook of profitability. Because if we farm that to the average, that is the outcome of farming to the average. That is a recommendation to plant that at 33,500 and to apply 160 pounds of nitrogen and to put on this much phosphorus and this much potassium. And it's time we really change our mindset to look at, how do I use the tools that are available to dramatically alter my break-evens? Because that 359 number, that's where a lot of guys are sitting today. I got to have 360 corn, and cash corn is at 315 or $3. What am I going to do? Well, the information is right in front of us to be able to shave off dollars. And that really is the purpose. Doesn't necessarily need to be just applied to fertilizer when it comes to the 4 R's. It should be applied to seed. It should be applied to chemistry. And everything that we're doing on our farms should relate back to, if I'm not making money in that area, that means I'm not maximizing my inputs. And if I'm not maximizing my inputs, then I'm sacrificing some other piece, which in a lot of instances is the environment. So the red areas are really just an indicator of the carrying capacity of that soil. So it's, in this particular instance on this field, we have some eroded soils. Those are some of the side hills in western Iowa. And this is very common to see fields that have, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20% of the farm that is really unprofitable. And a lot of people ask, should I not farm that? The reality is most growers right now today are going to want to farm it because it creates other challenges. My opinion is that, yeah, those are definitely areas that you should look at not farming. Now, when we have a lot of tenant and landlord relationships, it's really hard for that tenant to not farm that, because that's the landlord's revenue also. But as we think about the value of land and how we apply cash rent to this, that's another report that we have, is what should the cash rent be based on that outcome that you are experiencing. And so in that area, the cash rent should be dramatically less. In the areas where it's really profitable, the cash rent should be dramatically higher. And when you start to plug in those numbers the way that they should be allocated, maybe the average is still the same, but you've changed the way the field looks. So then that lends itself to even improved decision making, because let's say that black area now, the cash rent cost is $340. And in that red area, it's $140. Well, how would that influence your decision making as you start to look at, what am I going to spend on seed, fertility, the other components that go into your cropping system? And I hope there are some instances where seeing that red year over year, you do plant something that's a permanent vegetation and helps with that. But in a lot of instances, it's what are the inputs that are going into that, and how do we lower our break evens. We've already tested the theory of putting more on those areas, especially phosphorus and potassium. So our fertility recommendations are based on output. So if I remove X amount of bushels, let's say I take away 150 bushels in that area, it doesn't do me any good to fertilize that for 250 bushel corn. So we will fertilize based off of what I call the cost of goods to produce the bushel. So in that area, it's not getting as much P and K because it's not going to use it, because there are other underlying factors that are limiting yield. And in fact, if we would go soil sample based on this type of information, a lot of times you'll find out that those areas have an abundance of phosphorus and potassium. There are other soil characteristics like soil pH, erosion, lack of organic material, and those are some of the worst places to place more phosphorus, especially the way that the majority of phosphorus is applied today, where we're broadcasting it in a highly erosive area potentially. So what we would typically do, we would optimize the seeding rate, and then we would check to see if there is any other nutrient that would be limiting. The first nutrient that we look at in that environment is nitrogen, because it's lower organic matter, we're not mineralizing as much. So we would see if we could get a response to nitrogen by increasing the N rates there. If you don't get a response to nitrogen, then you're probably recognized this is the carrying capacity of the soil based on the water availability and the other, whether it's high soil pH or whatever underlying factors are there, and then we would just optimize it to the output that we would expect to get, whether that's 130, 40, 50 bushel corn. And everybody has those spots in their fields. I mean, everybody has areas that are not as productive, and there's a variety of reasons. My stance has always been, if you know that it's only going to raise 150 bushel corn, why are you farming it like it's going to raise 250? Because that is unprofitable and detrimental to the environment. Because if that plant is the greatest resource that we have to take up the nutrients that we're putting out there. And because of the methods that we've used to apply fertilizer, where we might take the average of a whole field and some soil samples and put that on there. So in this area, this is at high risk because we have potentially a lower yield and less nutrient uptake. This blue area is the highest yielding area, and that has the greatest capacity to produce more bushels. Oftentimes, this has been where we've under-fertilized, and this is where we've over-fertilized. And so we have to keep that in mind as we look at choosing the right mix of products and really what we are placing out there for fertility. It should be based off of an attainable goal and not the average of the farm, but the variation that exists within the field. So we use solely yield data, and we ask for yield data from the best year that you've ever had, and that is the reference point. So many times we've had a bunch of years worth of yield data, which complicates how people are managing their information because they've got to have 5, 6, 10 years, whatever the recommendation is. If I'm a farmer, I want to try to be better than my best year. So that's how we would manage all of these fields. And then if you have an off year, it's accounted for. So knowing that you had this fertility, I only took away this much, so now the following year I only need to apply this much to get there. So there needs to be a strong accounting component that, in my opinion, is missing from most systems because they are really just looking at this is what I applied this year based off of soil test data or whatever the case may be. if you have a drought and you don't remove that nutrition, that should be accounted for, and you should know how much to place back into the soil for what you took away. So that's why we base the fertility off of the cost of goods that go into produce that bushel. We really have set out to try to create something that is simple enough that it starts to put money back into growers' pockets. And you can see the ear weight report on this field, the average ear weight, 0.34 pounds. We're saying you could plant that field at an average seeding rate of 28,820. And on this particular field, if we did that, that'd save you $1,500 versus what was done prior to. So with these tools and with our experience on our own farm, where we have really started to implement strategies that are geared around driving higher yields and reducing inputs. And that's the win-win that we should all be after. How do we maximize the return on investment of everything that we put into our farming operation? And these are the tools that I hope to have on our farm and to use and really drive enhanced decision making. And so when you look at these reports, again, this is something that I wanted to be able to give back so that farmers could actually start to dive into this. These reports are free, and if you want to make changes, inputs, that's when there's a cost to it. But as far as being able to make decisions, they've really changed what we're doing on our farm and a lot of other growers' farms. If you'd like to find out more about what we're doing and how we're helping farmers to become more profitable, you can check out acumen.ag. It's as simple as creating an account, and you can upload your farm data, start getting reports. It's really a straightforward process to be able to load information, as simple as dragging and dropping your files into a folder, and that's really all there is to it. If you're interested in just looking at seed savings, you can check out seedsite.com/corn-seed-savings, and there's a quick quote tool that'll let you walk through what we think we can save you on seed.